Ow! 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 Ace of Spades here, welcome to Goblin-Inc. This should be the highest clearing build in the content creators beta. A lot of good players, Rob, Mekuna, Vudijo, many have played Spiritborn. I've seen Sork clears, Rogue clears that were far below Spiritborn. In terms of Spiritborn, I should still be quite a bit higher in pit clears than others. This is going to be my version of the build. And if anyone has a higher pit clear than the one I showed you, then I'm happy to be proven wrong. The pits have been changed, and now pit 100 is the same as pit 200 was before. So we already passed the old pit 200 with Spiritborn by a long mile. I believe I can easily push 120 on Vessel of Hatred, if not more, with Spiritborn. And probably blow past that. Let's go into the build. It is a Kapaleka build. Like many builds will be Kapaleka, as it is a very overtuned item. It consumes all of your resources to blow a huge guaranteed critical strike that deals 3% extra damage per point of resource spent. It also makes your core skill into basic skills, which plays into a lot of cool things with it. So this is going to be part of many Spiritborn builds. To leverage that item, by the way, I did not even have an ancestral weapon. This is a normal legendary weapon. Touch of Death is the highest base damage skill. The issue is that it does not crit, but there is something that you can make crit with this. And that is not Noxious Resonance, the keystone passive that everyone talks about, but actually the second portion of Touch of Death. When the infection expires, or the host dies, a swarm hatches and 60 enemies for 24 seconds, and is dealing 14% damage per hit. Doesn't look like a lot, but if you do 14% times 24, 140, 280, I believe it's 336%. That's a lot of weapon damage. And you can also include this aspect, which is Touch of Death Swarms. When is replaced early, it bursts by 300% of the damage it will have been done. It also killing extends duration, but it does not matter. Because when the swarm explodes, it bursts for 300%. That's what you want. You want the explosion, and now you have something that is direct damage and can crit. So that part is going to be critting. So guaranteed crit on a 300% multiplier on a 24-second times 14% damage. Insane math behind this. It's like such a high number. It's a crazy multipliers. And that is going to be the bulk of your damage. So this is really the main core of the build, and everything else is going to be, let's optimize everything and squeeze out most damage, tankiness, mobility, utility that we can. Cool things about this build. Number one, we're going to have 100% barrier thanks to Bulwark plus Gorilla main hole, which gives us barrier. And this combines very well with one of our Paragon legendary node, which gives us damage based on how much barrier we have. The more barrier you have, the more damage you do. And some of the best rare nodes in the game, we have reduced damage when we have a barrier up. So the hugest, chunkiest portion of your HP is gonna always be your barrier. Barrier is your main HP. Whenever you cast an ability, you get barrier. So it's like you have life leech, but for barrier. Incredible. That's one mechanic. Second mechanic that is really important for this build is scaling or damage with armor. Casting a Gorilla skill increases your weapon damage by X% of your armor for 3 seconds. So the more armor we have, the more damage we do. A lot of people run this build with the Chint Shell, and I swap to this item, but generally speaking, I don't use it besides for farming speed farms, because the more armor you have, the more damage you're gonna be doing. Juggernaut, total armor, touch of that swarm duration, of course, and yeah, anything armor related on chest and pants is extremely strong. Full armor on and touch of that swarm duration. So your defensive items functioning as offensive items for this class. Very powerful. We are adding a little bit of barrier generation on our gems to get 100% barrier thanks to the Bulwark plus the Gorilla. The Gorilla main hold does not scale with barrier generation, but Bulwark does, and it's really good. So we take, like I said, Insatiable is our main damage aspect. Armor on chest and pants. We want to have total armor on the Amulet, which is very easy to find. And I think people that don't like to get passives on Amulets are going to enjoy this build, because it allows you to get really powerful stat on Amulet without needing to spend billions of gold. This build also does not run any uniques, as you can see. Sorry, any mythical uniques, meaning that it's very approachable for casuals as well, and very easy to transition after leveling. Our second best damage aspect is the Redirected Force. It gives us 70% of our block chance as critical strike damage. 70% of your block chance becomes crit damage and gets doubled if you have blocked in the last 10 seconds. We can get 100% block with Armored Hide, which is going to be permanently up via different mechanics that we can use for Spiritborn. And it gives us 100% block chance. 100% block chance, it gives us also Unstoppable, Turns, and also gives us Resolve stacks, which reduce our damage and increase our damage. Incredible skill that does everything and coffee for you, pretty much. So, how much damage is that? That is 140% damage multiplier. 100% block, double, 140% extra damage. Can you go above 100% block? No, you can't. So it's capped, no reason to go for more block chance in the build. Ring of the Midnight Sun. We've talked about how we spend all of our resources with Rod of Kepaleka, but how do we get them back? That's the question. Every time we crit, we get 50% of our resources back per cast. Each skill only procs the effect once, so it is important that when we crit, we get 100% of the resources back. The crit is already guaranteed, so we do not need to run crit chance, but we need to make sure that we get 100% resources. Okay, 50%, that's 50%. With Ravager, as you can see, the modifiers has, while Ravager is active, core skills instantly dash to your target, and all vigor generation is increased by 30%. That's good. 50% times 1.3 for 30%. It's quite a bit and gets us close to 100%, but not quite there. To reach 100%, it's a combination of Paragon nodes, talents, and one roll of resource generation on your ring. No big deal. At that point, this 50% becomes 100%, so every time you cast, you get 100% resources back. Now we're down to the last two items of the build. The boots, and we're gonna talk about also the runes that goes on the weapon. For the weapon, I currently have Warcry, and I have to explain that there is a bug with attack speed in this version. It has been fixed in the version that we are gonna be playing live, which means that there is no point for me running more ferocity stacks with the duelist aspect, which increases our ferocity. Normally, that aspect would be on my boots, because it's the best damage I can get is more ferocity stacks. But because there is a bug with attack speed, and I do not benefit from that, I'm running Source cast Vortex on its landing location, because I always want to play with Vortex. Vortex is really important to play in this build as it increases your clear speed tenfold. Right now, I'm casting Vortex with Soar, but normally speaking, we'll be casting Vortex instead of Warcry. Because the ferocity gained from the aspect that we are missing right now, because ferocity is not working for us right now, would be higher than the 50% damage from Warcry. And that's the TLDR on why there will be a small swap in the builder. Make sure that you always keep up to date with the Mobalytics tier list for Spiritborn. I keep it up to date with my friend Sanctum, which is the best third crafter in the game. You probably know him from Rogue. If you have played Rogue, you know who Sanctum is. Best third crafter in the game. Me and him are gonna be doing all the work on Spiritborns, and he's a beast. So, we also calculated everything before the content creator beta. So, I just went in, and I had all the information already calculated. However the Spiritborn worked, I already know all the math on like what is best to run and where. And it was very easy for me to find this version of the build because I had done 90% of the work before it. Alright, so why do I have these Rakanaut Wake boots? Rakanaut Wake boots are gonna be what you run instead of Tyrell's Might. Tyrell's Might is not a good item to run in this build, and I will explain to you why. So, let's say that you do not have the perfect Beast full GA gear for this class. So you cannot cap resistances in an easy way. Rakanaut Wakes will give you 63% resistances at +8 with just GA, and caps your resistances, so you do not have to worry about it. The cooldown, the non-physical damage and move speed are great, and you lose a very marginal amount of damage to not run these boots. What this allows you is that now you have free up the slot on your chest. If you cap your resistances with Tyrell's Might, you would be missing out in one of the best, most fun thing about Spiritborn, which is that for the majority of content, you can skip some damage and play with Jachin Shell. Jachin Shell is gonna give you so much cooldown reduction that you'll be spamming your Soar, the Hunter, Ravager, and you will have so much more mobility that you can speed farm the content incredibly easy. So for pushing pets, I will have one version for pushing pets, you change your chest. And for speed farm, we're gonna be playing with the Jachin Shell. The only change then after that is this one. Alright, so for speed farming, Noxious Resonance is really good because it allows you to pop your Touch of Death Swarms instantly. Every time you crit, Touch of Death Swarm disappears. If you do not run Noxious Resonance, what happens? Well, you need to stack your Touch of Death 3 times before you can pop it. Because you can have up to 3 swarms, the skill says. In which case, you are a little... If you are one-shotting content, you want to only cast your skill once, not 3 times. So for any content that is easy, so you're speed farming, most important content in the game is going to be the Undercity, which is really easy. So you would be running with something that has more AoE, more burst, more mobility. So what I do is, I run with Noxious Resonance, which whenever I deal crit damage, removes the poison from the target, which removes Touch of Death, which spawns the next swarm, and spawning the swarm replaces the previous one, and that is why this instantly applies the damage compared to not having it. This one makes your Touch of that swarm explode instantly. Without it, you need to stack it up first. Prodigy's Tempo is very powerful. It gives us both cooldown reduction and also at the same time ranks to all of our skills. So both CDR and damage. It's incredibly powerful passive for Keystone, and it allows us to play without the Jachin Shell. So if you're gonna go full damage, you're gonna have a little bit of less burst, a little bit less cooldown on Soar, but you have more damage and less burst and less mobility. So very easy. Do you need to do bosses? Put on a chest with Juggernaut. Do you need to do speed farm? Put on Jachin Shell. And with that is the explanation of how the small tweak you can do with this build. I made it easy by playing with Rakanaut Wake. If you play with Tyrell's Might, the moment you take off Tyrell's Might, you try to go more damage, you can't. So you might not be able to do Tormented bosses, because then you have 0 resistances, and you're dead. If you play with the Rakanaut Wake, you can switch between speed farm and boss farm, just like this. And I believe that to be an incredibly good thing. And the build remains optimized for both contents now. On top of that, I will have a full Bastion slot. You can technically cap your resistances with Incense and other stuff like GA, resistances to all elements, rolls. But I believe most people will not have triple GA items. I will have the version for the sweatiest players. I will have the version for the normal players, and that should please everyone. Let me know if you want more specifically optimized builds for different types of content. I might make a hardcore version, for example, of Spiritborn. It is more tanky, less damage. This build is optimized for damage and speed farm, and it's still tanky enough to face tank T100 and all the content in the game. But you might die sometimes, so which is not great for hardcore, obviously. We have on the amulet, we're gonna be running, like I said, the gorilla damage. I'm gonna show the aspect one more time. Block here, block damage, Midnight Sun, Kepaleke, boots with Swordcast Vortex, or we'll be running Rakanot's Wake. Disobedience, Touch of Death, Juggernaut, Ebiwaka, run as much armor as you can on every slot. Spirit Hole, Gorilla, for barrier and Torn application. Jugger for the extra ferocity stack, and it's really good. It also makes your skill Jugger, which allows you to play with Furnace passive. For skills, we're gonna be using Sword for mobility, Hunter, Counterattack, Ravager, Armored Hide, Touch of Death. Now let's get into the skills, why I've taken them, the passives, and all the cool stuff. Okay, so for Keystone we talked about Prodigy's Tempo. It's your tormented boss kill, push build. Whenever you're struggling, play Prodigy's Tempo. Whenever you want a quick burst, Noxious Resonance is great for speed farming. Hunter gives us both more ferocity stacks and 100% damage against injured enemies. It's the best ultimate and the only good ultimate in the game for Spiritborn. We have a Resolution for damage. Spiritual Attunement gives us 30 resources, which is more damage for Kepaleke. And Supremacy, it's a great multiplier, it's 10% per point, and it's one of the best ones for Spiritborn that you can have on Amulet. For Touch of Death, we take Poised to make it a core skill. We take Oppressive for more damage. We take Ravenous for more damage, simply damage passives. We take Potent, it is the best overall passive for Spiritborn. It is 10% damage per point. But it's not as great on speed farm because you kill them very quickly, right? So it doesn't stack. That's great. You need to hit them 10 times. Great for bosses, great for pits. Furnace was nerfed hard, and it's a decent damage multiplier. It's 1.5% ferocity. With 13 stacks of ferocity, it's gonna be 15 plus 4.5, 19.5 divided by 3, 6.5% per point. It's decent, but not as good as Potent, which is 10%. We have Vehemence, it's also 10% for this build. It's only for potency skills, but Touch of Death is one. So that's your second best, or maybe the best for this build passive. 5% HP per point from Resilient. I'm taking this to extra cap my poison resistance. It's anti-venom. This one says poisoning, and poisoning damage is not poison damage, it's dot damage, which we do not care about, so we don't take it. Counterattack is an interesting thing. Now, counterattack we have passively, thanks to the Midnight Sun Ring, we passively do have some of its powers. So we cannot activate it, but we could run this without putting it on our bar. We would get the dodge chance, and we would get the 30% damage to close enemies on critical strikes. Personally, my build was 1 GA items, and I wasn't very well masterworked, so I did not feel tanky enough to run without the dodge. You can have 100% dodge chance and permanently keep counterattack active with this build, with Jachin Shell and with Prodigy's Tempo, either of them. Meaning that this gives you a lot of tankiness. Now, if your gear is Chef Kiss, you could technically run with 2 points in Scourge or 50% damage. Personally, I couldn't. But in my min-maxed full you probably RMT'd the gear to have that, you will have Scourge. But some people might dislike the fear, and honestly, it would be, you know, which version of the build you run, up to you. I've explained how each version will work, and it's up to you to make the choice. Personally, the best version is the first one. I will put the default one, and then I will make versions that are more optimized for specific contents. Armored Hide. We take Reinforced Armored Hide. It gives us block damage reduction. It's nice. We also get Torn damage. We get maximum resolve stacks, which is like kind of like Fortify, kind of like the Shadow Orbs rotating around rogues. Whenever, you know, you get hit, you lose 1 stack of resolve, and you get a damage reduction the more resolve you have. If you take Perseverance, which I don't really care about because I'm really tanky already. Enhanced Armor Hide, I might have it though to make, because I think that lower level of gear, I will put it on and I might take it off after. I have Enhanced Armor Hide returns. It's 1.5% perseverance per resolve stack. It's really good, but for pushing the pit like I did, I was able to survive without it, barely, so I took it out. In my build of Mobalytics, I will have it though, because it's a really good one, and I'm not trying to impress anyone. When I play the game normally, I'm okay with losing a little bit of damage, like 5% damage to die 50% less times, right? But you need to be able to make those decisions for yourself. There is not one perfect version of the build. I will give you a very well optimized version of the build, and you can make small adjustments on your own based on the information you learn. We take Apex, which is 15% damage to vulnerable enemies. We take Focal Point, the block damage reduction. I think it's pretty good. You can remove 2 points here if you want. The reason why I do not take Diminishment is because vulnerable enemies deal less damage to you. Sometimes it's not the enemies that are vulnerable that kills you. Most of the time it's explosions, it's the shadow clones from the pit boss, it's things that are not vulnerable, meaning that this really, honestly, does not do anything for us. We take Vortex. I like the knockdown on Vortex, especially if you run with the fear. It counteracts that. I like Soar, and I like making enemies vulnerable and moving that, because it continues following you and continues making enemies vulnerable. I find this to be very good, and I run it in pretty much all my builds. Ravager. We take a Measured Ravager for the resource generation, and because it allows us to follow enemies. It's kind of like Shred for Druid if you've played it. This class is incredibly mobile. It has so many abilities that make you move. Both Soar, Hunter, and Ravager allows you to move. We take Balanced Exertion. It's more damage, and we take 1 point in Vigorous. You can add more point in Vigorous if you need more resource generation for your build. The amount of resource generation needed for the build to function is accounted for in the build guide, and you get a specific number. As long as you have that number, you do not need to put more points in Vigorous. If you do not have enough, you could put more points here. And your basic skill does not matter. Let's talk about the Mercenaries a second. For the Mercenaries, personally, I running with resistances, but it's because attack speed is bugged again. Temporary attack speed does not work in this beta. Otherwise, I would be running with the... I don't remember her name. The female mercenary that gives you a lot of attack speed and movement speed. Currently, I'm running this because I do not have enough resistances for my build. So I'm taking resistances from my mercenary right here. And I'm taking a little bit of damage actually with Inspiration. And honestly, Grand Slam, pretty good mercenary. It gives you damage and resistances, which I need. You can also take armor for more damage if your attack speed capped. And my second mercenary doesn't do anything. He gives me a little bit of damage reduction. But I will have different mercenaries on my build of Mobalytics. And the reason why I'm running this guy is because I need the resistances. Again, if you do not have them or if you feel like you're lacking armor, you can always use right here. Mercenaries are really there to fill up what you're missing. And in my opinion, when you have the good gear, you can run the other mercenary that gives you move speed and attack speed, and that's the best one you can run. For Paragon, let's quickly go over the things you have to know about Paragon for this class. Generally, no one cares about Paragon and people click away, but I would say stay a second more and learn about the glyphs and why you need to run certain things. Colossal, 2% damage for each stack of resolve. This means that the more resolves you have, the more damage you do. Is resolve stacks better than total armor as a tempering? Because they're both defensive. Depends how much tempering on total armor have. So on my build, I will have the correct balance between total armor and resolve stacks to min-max that. So you don't have to think about it, but that's why you know why things are the way they are. Witcher Shield, probably the best Paragon legendary node for Spiritborn. The more bar you have, the more damage you do. Best rare node that we have, incredible amount of barrier damage reduction, and that's why barrier is really your main and first line of defense. And you do not have to be afraid of dropping your HP when you play with the Jachin Shell for the speed farming build, because your main defense is really your barrier, which never goes down. A lot of attack speed on Spiritborn, a lot of maximum resistance, armor, max life. This build really utilizes everything on the board. Incredible Paragon board for Spiritborn. We have Covengers, which gives us 30% damage. It is a little bit complicated. The TLDR is that after you have enough of 2 stats, you give 20% of that becomes a multiplier. So if you have, 1,000 damage to crit damage, then, you get 15% damage. With 20% of that as a multiplier, up to 30% with your 2 highest bonuses. It's already all calculated and capped in the build. Run Spirit, nothing crazy. A lot of attack speed in this build on the Paragon board and max life rest. Incredible rare nodes on Spiritborn. Revealing 30% damage to CC'd enemies, not great. Legendary nodes on Spiritborn are a bit weak. Faster, it is just a good damage multiplier Paragon glyph, 15%, a 10% another multiplier, and then 16% per 5 dexterity. And dexterity is your main stat, which means that the dexterity glyphs generally are better than strength or int. Revenge, bonus to all rare nodes. Also, Revenge, dealing torn damage to an enemy, increases all damage it takes from you by 1%, up to 15%. And that's why dealing Thorns damage is important, because it allows us to get the 15% damage bonus. This glyph also enhances our rare nodes, which is very important, as this rare node gives us maximum resources. And if you have followed what I've said about the build, the more resources you have, the more damage you do. So extremely optimized on that sense. And the legendary node here is sapping. When you cast 3 Gorilla, Jugger, Eagle, or Centipede skills with the same spirit in a row, you restore 15% of your vigor and deal 30% increased damage. The resource generation doesn't really matter because it's inconsistent for the build, but the 30% is nice. Very similar to Ancestral Guidance for Druid. That's the end of the build. And I believe I've explained all my choices for all the mechanic regarding the build. And you can be sure that the builds on the tier list of Mobalytics for Spiritborn will be made by me and Sanctum. Sanctum is the best story crafter in the game, in my opinion. Makes generally rogue builds, and if you've played rogue builds, chances are you've seen all the rank 1 builds mostly come from Sanctum. And he's amazing, and we are gonna be optimizing Spiritborn together. And it's gonna be a really fun and good working with the guy. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And yeah, play Spiritborn, it's great.